Hello and welcome. It's me, Joan, Mainline Sociology. And in my last podcast, I introduced you to my family who came from Scotland and joined with other Scots people in the wilderness of Minnesota. People forget just how big this world is. And these settlers landed in a place that was inhabited with all kinds of other villages. And as I told you, my great grandfather welcomed visitors into his farm in the late 1880s. And his question was always, why are you here? Where did you come from? Who were your people? We're embarking on an enlightened new world. The enlightened dialectic, I discovered, has been bastardized, changed into this notion of idealism versus materialism. Very clever, and I'll get into that. What I also discovered was that my very own aunt, in Wikipedia and in different places that people wrote about her, they characterized her in a way that is very false. That because she was a woman entering into politics, that she was on all these committees for women's rights and the suffrage movement. She knew from her generations, her great grandfathers and mothers, her mother and father, that we were here, that all men were created equal. Get over yourself hearing the word man in that. We are all men. We are all brothers. We are all sisters. The divine feminine and the divine masculine, also another dialectic, but let's stick to the dialectic I found in my great grandfather's friend, Adolf Dehn, who knew he was free, as my grandfather and generations before me did, in this new world, under this new contract, that all people are equal because they came from the oppression of social class. The crown and the Vatican were brutal, and they would not stop until they captured every single clan, village, and people around them. They knew this. They had the memory. They came to this new world. Hey, my government's not going to kill me now. I have the right to life. I have the right to liberty. I know I can self-govern. I don't need someone to tell me how to act, how to think, how to behave. And I have the right to pursue happiness, which is the vocation that makes you tick. I like to talk, but I have been silenced for a very long time, and I'm very happy to do the research that I have done. And I've had that privilege to do it. Whole other story, right? But here what you're looking at is my dresser. And this is my Adolf Dehn sketch and how I always thought of him. how I always characterized his work as drawing and sketching peaceful areas of the wilderness, farms scattered throughout the land, villages scattered throughout the land, people living in peace and harmony, and discussing what is this enlightened spirit that we have been blessed with our new Constitution here in the United States. Well, it's this freedom from the horrors of the generations before them. They're also imbued with this idea that they knew no opposite of, that the only alienation that they would ever experience is someone hurting? Is someone around me? Is a village around me in need? We'll help them if we can. Their lives were peaceful. And I'm showing you this picture because, to me, if you saw my house, it would be symbols all over it, right? And I've lived in many places, but I always had these elephants. And a lot of people looked at my elephant collection, I guess you would say, oh, you're a Republican. Well, I'm not a Republican and I'm not a Democrat. I'm a person who understands that there is no division. But in order to get you there, that the whole notion of being divided is a trick. It's a tool. It's a tool used for control. So I like elephants because when I was a little girl, I learned about elephant culture. And one thing about elephants is they never forget. Groups of elephants will make pilgrimages to the bones of their ancestors. They help each other. They have this way of being that I came to admire very much. And it's difficult when you don't forget. But that's the whole part of the dialectic. The other goal I have with this is to get you to see that a society has been built inside of you through various characteristics. And when it's inside of you, it can be controlled so easily. Maybe some of you will remember a few years ago when this social media blitz happened, and it was called the Me Too movement, right? And it was about everybody's been abused and hurt, and it's time for us to remember that pain. Well, that's a very good trick that they pulled on us, because as we'll learn when we go to advanced capitalism, that remembering your worst nightmare is the enemy's dream. That may make no sense to you right now, but it will. The third goal of this podcast is also to show you, using mainstream social science, I will get no argument from social scientists about the way they characterize how we move through time. And that is a series of dialectics. Yes, for the most part, they're external in sociology, but in psychology, they're also used. Either way, they're traps. And as I bring forth the information that I want to bring forth, I need you first to understand that it's very hard for everybody to move to a new idea, to let go of the beliefs that they have because they're so hidden inside of us. And I will introduce an exercise to you for you to see them. For now, I'd like to show you a dialectic of a man who was a friend of my great-grandfather's, and his dialectic that I noticed just looking at his work online. So my idea was that he drew our farm, that he drew the peaceful nature of the world around us, the world that he saw coming to be, people working together, people participating in governments, people who knew their pursuit of happiness would be important. And in Adolf Dahn's case, wow. All right. So these are some of his earlier works. And he does see a peaceful area. I see it. I wanted to show it to you. I wrote an essay about this. It's very long. Maybe I'll read it to you sometime before the storm in our farm. It seems as if he almost saw this storm coming. I don't know how he would have, but he did. And as I mentioned, my great aunt Anna got into politics basically because of this Cloquet fire. And as I have discovered since I've last spoken to you, this had an impact that was so great that I can't overstate it. And it is also a dialectic about the time that we live in now. And I'll circle back to that. So my aunt was busy telling everyone that our government is, if they're here to help us, all this death and destruction that happened in this Cloquet fire, which as you'll recall is 10,000 miles of blazes, basically half of Minnesota burned down, thousands were killed. And we see Adolf Dehn depicting this tragedy. Yes, maybe the government was there to help some of the settlers rebuild houses, but my Aunt Anna was and remains incensed by the fact that the people who also were here were forgotten. They were just forgotten. So we see a change in his work already happening. And at this time, after the fire, he decided to leave and he decided to explore a bigger world because the one that he had known was gone. So he set out on the road. And I found this interesting, that he would stop along the way and draw this mine and dam because this is part of it. But his work became more obscure. And it's not my intent to decipher this piece of art in particular or any of them. It's just to see that his once pursuit of happiness life had been ripped from him. And he traveled across the country, drawing along the way different things he saw. And he was on his way to New York. And when he arrived, this change in his actual art, I think, will astound you. So he's trying to see it as a colorful, happy place, a place of dreams, a place of great marvels of technology. I know he's tried. I can see him trying. But still, the idea of the fire remained. And as the Industrial Revolution moved in, I believe he is trying to capture the differences in this mode of production, as Karl Marx so aptly predicted how this would happen. He saw the groups forming, the differences. Who are you people? And as a person who needed money, of course, he contracted with the government to make posters. And I do believe he created Uncle Sam. And furthermore, I think he picked a face that he felt was an ideal of what embodies an American. And dare I say, that person was my great-grandfather. He's mixing things here in a way that is so clear to me, but may not be clear to you. But it is nonetheless a dialectic, the once peaceful landscapes that he drew, and there are thousands of them. And if you search Adolf Dehn, you'll see, how could one person draw so many pictures in one lifetime? Well, that was a question I had, But I happen to know of very well an artist who does oil paintings, and she can do 8 in a day. So people who draw and people who pursue their happiness become obsessed with it. And I'm no different. My obsession has grown more and more over the past 20 years and has quickened to a pace that I can barely keep up with, that he's seen. It's hard to define what I do as art, but we're all artists in our own right. We see a little bit of confusion. We see making sense of what's going on around him, sitting in the clubs of New York, cultures being introduced in very strange ways. He wants it to be a happy place, but I'm not sure how happy he really was with this gathering. And so he stayed in New York for a while and then made his way down to Florida with sort of a new vision, colors. Is there peace and tranquility? And that too, I think, was short-lived. That's not an Adolf Dehn. Some of the other things that he did. And I want you to be afraid. Or stop being afraid of other Americans, other religions, other classes of speaking out. You're an American first. Act like it. Well, thank you, Mr. Dehn. Juxtaposition with, I'm counting on you. Don't discuss troop movements. And I'll close with this haunting cover of a magazine that he did with the new masses. Dialectics are individual inside you. They are external, world-changing events. They've come fast and furious for us in the last 5 years. And the main thing that we're being asked to be is Americans, and to come back to the simplicity and the beauty of enlightened thinking, to believe, to know that the 1% who have had this master plan for 2,000 years to keep us divided, first by nobles and slavery, and then, ooh, peasant classes. And when you begin to understand how flipping a dialectic from an enlightened dialectic, where I will remind you is the idea that the only fracture in the human condition is to know the suffering of others. If one person is suffering in the world, or is going without, or is denied something, then it's our responsibility to help them out. And this really is enlightened thinking. Now, what I discovered, and what I'll discuss in my next podcast, is how the very notion of this enlightenment was changed to reduce to known as, some of you who may have studied sociology in school, or are philosophers, or are plain old endured this world of materialistic things. The one with the most cars wins, or the most, the best job with the most money wins. This is such an accepted idea that we forget where it came from. We forget that there was once an enlightened idealism, enlightened dialectic, excuse me. They changed it to idealistic dialectic, to materialistic dialectic. Marx flipped that on its head and brought us back to the notion that the Geist is gone, so to speak. And I'll explain what my mind came up with for that. So just to show you that one event, one tragedy changed the way this man looked at the world.